I mean, I think unlocking the self is the most important thing that you could do as a human being on this planet. There is so much of the oversoul of this planet that is asleep, and half of the other oversoul is awake. It's this kind of intermediate zone, something of the yin and yang, I think. And everybody is just an expression, of something, whether there is a platform of social media one can project their authenticity upon, is all an expression using a surrogate. And what a surrogate is, it's different from a cyborg or the AI, artificial intelligence. A surrogate is no more than a conduit to be controlled by. It's a conduit to be controlled by something else with an intelligence, not entirely an artificial intelligence, because, well, if it was an artificial intelligence that would control the surrogate, it would just be an AI. But at the same time as we use these surrogates, we are projecting the authenticity through the surrogate of a social media platform. And it's really a software. There is no hardware with it. We are the hardware, and so the software just follows along syntactically with the expository existential self expressionalism of using these platforms, social media or whatever it may be. I think these platforms are really raison d'etre for expressing, I think, any kind of conduit that you could put a full spectrum of the self upon. I think certain spectrums of this teledynamic communication or physical abstract, I think it could be used to somewhat flicker art forms out of, whether it's, creating memeing processes through image, visual stimulation, words and ideas, a small unit of measurement of an idea, or it may be music, dance, appetition, love, rudimentary abstract expressionalism. All these things are all conduit to the full spectrum of the human self. I think these social platforms are a way in which one can be benign from the self and exfoliate existentially to show a higher self. And I think these conduits, these surrogates that we use, these digital platforms of mediography, are not the distorted images of the self, but I think they are the full, true spectrum of the self, because in reality, the one who is behind the surrogate is the one who is chaos. We are chaos. We are all kinds of emotions, up and down, love, sad, your highs, your fears, your orgasms, your self-limiting obscurity of trying to find a dialect on this planet. I think we are all an expression of the self. And what is very interesting about this is, the self-distorted imagery is not from the surrogate itself, but it is the self behind the surrogate that is self-distorted. I think this is the most beautiful art form because it's completely abstract from something that has a preformation of a solid fixture upon it. In other words, something that is, completely negated as something that has an obscurity to it, or something that is, it has this kind of raison d'etre. Well, what is interesting is for these surrogates is that they all require an observer, without an observer, there is no show. There is no rudimentary abstract expressionalism, because there's nothing to express to. And the same thing goes with physics, through, these principles that uses the least common, answer for something. I think in physics, a particle doesn't behave unless there is an observer. This is one of those as above, so below kind of acronyms, so forth. I think in the same way, these surrogates are conduits for, requiring an observer to participate. In the same way, it's like, what would, as a metaphor, how would God behave if there wasn't an observer to observe his art form of this planet and everything on it? We are all experiencing realities subjectively, and this holy illusion, this reality is, it's I think what is going on is these social media platforms are a kind of way of finding the singularity, or finding, in other words, a concrescence where everything becomes one. And I think this is the ultimate kind of fear that has been hammered out through the institutions of mass propaganda, i.e. religious Christian Calvinism, Mormonism, every kind of denomination that requires an exegesis of its kind of ritual, its institutions. The biggest fear is boundary dissolution, because if everything comes together, then we all have one big perspective. We all would have the same perspectives, but it all hangs in a balance whether or not we're ready to let down our walls for others to see, I think. And so I think through music, dance, poetry, rudimentary abstract philosophy, communication, appetition, love, theater, all these things are all an expression to let down the walls of the self, to let others see these art forms. And all art really is the walls coming down on the self to show the world what you are. You are an artist. You are the sine qua non of all existence, measured into one singularity on this planet subjectively. It's we are all novels of some kind of story. I think it's just a matter of will, if you launch your story or not. I mean, one could go through the finite life, in a 9-to-5 job, and trying to make sense of the world, and trying to spend as much time as you can with the finite life that you're given. But, to take the notion of everything so serious, such as religion, politics, all this kind of table-pounding polemicist kind of positions, I think are all the death of creativity, because it solidifies experience. And the solidification of experience is no more than trying to find the word. It is no more than the stopping of creativity, because when one solidifies, one stops to become vibratory. It doesn't vibrate. You don't vibrate. And the ones who vibrate are the ones that really shake the world the most, I think. The ones that vibrate are the most artistic, because they shed their they shed their being all around others and situations. They're more fluid and not as static. I think the static ones are the less artistic in a way, because something that is solid becomes an obstacle, and an obstacle does not vibrate. It's solidified. And so all this stuff, the lifting of Christian Calvinism, the lifting of the churches, of institutions, the lifting of, the political covalence of, this planet, this whole kind of raison d'etre that is, we all take notion seriously as a citizen on this earth or whatever you are embedded in, is no more than a cop-out of the artistic mind in giving away to an ideological perspective that has no kind of unsolidity to it, and a citizen is this weird idea that was generated out of the printing press, that everybody would be treated atomistically, instead of, a citizen would not be someone who would think on themselves. Citizens would be the whole public. The public is the same view. It's this notion of that was generated out of the same printing press during the Gutenberg address, the printing press. And it's that everybody has it equal, everybody, will just give everyone this charge, and it limits the self. It causes the self to not think subjectively for themselves. Everybody is just put in this category as this, social milieu of, existential existence as one pool, a left wing or right wing, and I think most of this stuff is really a flicker, a scintilla through the past of the ontological historical artifice that has come upon our, the active being through the historiography of this planet that has been hammered down and regurgitated and put into the minds of the masses, I think. As all this lifts away, all this stuff is been taken. All this notion of all this that I speak of, has been taken seriously by the generation of baby boomers and people that have all kind of have this political kind of demagogical charge of how the planet and the world should be. They're out there screaming death to the enemy, screaming build the wall, and separating our fellow human beings from another. Instead of building bridges, we're out here building walls. It just makes no sense. It literally is what Alfred North Whitehead said about driving through the future, only looking at the rear view mirror. There is no future vision. We all just build backwards from the primary datum that has been handed down by the well-behaved reductionist of regurgitated political demagoguery that has captivated the religions of the West and hammered it down the throats of all the citizens and the public view, to make everyone feel cringed and cramped in. But now, in the wake of the 20th century, the mind is just too large to keep inside of a container, using these surrogates and everything that is going on. We're finding ourselves downloading information faster than ever before. Our input datum is just as fast as our output. Our input datum is trying to keep up with the output, but there's so much input from the planet that we take in as we view all these kinds of processes that take place all around us, I think, and all this kind of solidity that we've taken serious about the political body and all this kind of thing is a complete death in creativity. I mean, there is no room for any kind of revolution from it. I mean, revolutions are nothing more than a pulse that is derived out of the social milieu, that is the driving force that pushes back at the dominators that tried to run this whole social milieu, this whole raison d'etre, I think, and so that's why there is so much art being expressed. I think now is the time to really find yourself in what you do. I remember my time, I was, everything just flows, and a lot of people, that find their artistic way, maybe some of them are afraid because of the systems that have been brought forth. I mean, you come into this planet, sitting among great accomplishments that could never be accomplished by the self if it wasn't for hundreds of years of hashed out kind of ideas put together, hacked out. It's a funny thing. I think now is the time to really find it, but not everybody is ready. I think it just requires, how far you're willing to reach and pull out of your imagination your own vision of what you want to be, because everything is this metamorphosis. I've seen it in the rainforest myself under the shamans out there. They speak of this, and I'm no Terence McKenna on this at all, but through my experience, I think we all have a voice, and it all must be heard. Use your voice to create, because it's the most important thing that we have, language to come together. I think we only go as far as our minds retain in the container that it is in. And it's just important to metamorphosize, to cocoon out of our existential position, whether it's these bad relationships or some kind of existential thing you may going through. The metamorphosis processes just show you that all the bad stuff, when you come out of it, is no more than the detritus of a cocoon that sheds everything bad. And you just become this butterfly, this art expression, this rudimentary abstract expressionalism of art that is capable of lighting the lights of 1,000 suns. I think this is what we should aim to do. I don't think we should take serious of these political agendas, these Trumps, these things that the baby boomers take so serious, because the baby boomers come out of a social milieu that is completely linear. That is why the youth generation has put so much awe and raised a brow to these older gentlemen and people, because they've never seen art expressionalism this vast before. And it just throws them against the wall. They don't know what to think. So the only thing that these baby boomers could cling on to is the political demagoguery that has been hashed and regurgitated down their throats through years of non-well-behaved reductionism images of society that has swallowed them whole through the mass propaganda institutions of religious phenomenon or religious thinking, has created a death of creativity. I mean, these people talk about they see God, but yet God is an expression of all religions through everything. You could see this through glossolalia. Glossolalia is a strange phenomenon in religion that occurs through Christianity. It has no monopoly on it, but it's a speaking of tongues, and different religions have it. Everybody has this kind of raison d'etre of sacred temple within themselves, or existentially, that everyone feels God, and all these Western thought processes that these people go through that are completely dead in the art form have nothing else to cling on to. I mean, these people rather chant "build the wall" than build bridges. I mean, what is this? I mean, this is not a psychedelic point of view to have, nor is it a provisional point of view to have. It's very linear. And I think what these people are is they're afraid. They're afraid of everyone coming together and saying bullshit to their, bullshit. We don't want to participate in your institutional thinking. We don't want to become a surrogate inside of your demagoguery of hashed out reductionist views of how life should be. Life is very short. It's finite. And the real index of intelligence is humor, because you have to laugh at these situations and just have a laugh to live, laugh, and love, whether you're a struggling individual with a broken family trying to pick up the pieces, or maybe you're a drug addicted individual who's gone through the ringer trying to hold it all together. None of this defines you. I mean, you can't compare yourselves to the successful participants in society, because they're nothing more than just expressions of what they think reality really is. But it is only through the broken that that separates the collectivity from the individuality processes. I think to be an individualist is more of a broader experience and a grasp perspective of life than it is to be a collectivist. I mean, I think everyone is dynamic in every way, and everyone has this art form. And even if you are embedded and trapped in some kind of self-mitigating process of, whatever the Western meme is of the hour, participating in society, being a citizen, or being the public, all this is just an expression of an ideological concept. It's a strange thing. Everything is just balkanized epistemologies. Over here they're practicing this, over here and that. They're just trying to coexist with each other inside of a metaframe of democratic liberalism. I mean, none of this is really real. All this political stuff, it's not real. It's a reality is just too provisional. You might go out to the outskirts of Colombia, where I had been near Bolivia, and you find this completely useless in the society, all this kind of stuff. And what the philosophy of the Peruvian way and all these different kinds of places in Latin America, especially places out in Mexico, is that the real political and social public milieu is really coming together and helping each other out and seeing the vision and giving love. Peruvians out in Bolivia, this man once told me that the Peruvian philosophy is to, as you give to one, always give no matter what. And the casuistry will follow amongst it. It will follow amongst it. As you give, you will receive in the same way in a Western sense. But all this stuff, I mean, we're building walls against the most beautiful and rich, culturally sanctioned countries of the world that have so much monopoly on life, appetition, and creativity than the Western mind has ever had. I mean, the stories in Mexico are just, La Ronda and all these kinds of things out there. The plants out there, the sacred plants that heal, the stories, the people are the most unique, most self-motivated, most artistic people that are out there, and we just rather build our walls. And I always ask myself this, because it's the same kind of situation, and I ask people this, is that a good metaphorical expression is Mormonism. Now, Mormonism, their ideological process is to have everyone become a convert. Now, what would happen if everybody converted to Mormonism? What if they all had it by their hands and everybody in the whole planet of 6 billion people was a Mormon? Well, what would happen is that it would be one conquest of dimensionality. Only one. There would be no jumping out of the conquest of dimensionality into another dimensionality, because everybody would have the same feel, the same look, the same belief system. And the same way that a one single organism only coordinates one point of view, a linear point of view. Life would be very linear if everybody was a Mormon. That's why when all these societies, all these political Trump-loving magas come together to have it one big view, as the public domain milieu tries to, it would all be one linear level of understanding, and there would be no art expression out of it. It would be a very boring, existential, linear understanding in that conquest of dimensionality that nobody would ever jump out of. In the same way, it's no wonder why the oxygen-addicted fish a millennia ago made its first leap onto land, because if it didn't, it wouldn't know how to do progression. It wouldn't progress through conquesting dimensionality. That's why us as a species, we come through epigenetic evolution, politics, religion, dance, and now we jump ourselves into the machine, into the surrogate, into art forms. This is nonlinear, and this is frightening to the Mormon community. This is frightening to the religious institutions that try to all have it one way, one view, and one notion of reality only. These people have trap their minds into some kind of container that has been self-limiting, self-negating, non-prospering. There is no art. And now imagine that, a world where everybody was Mormon. It would just be a complete linear, non-abstract view of reality. There's just no conquest of dimensionality. So this is kind of the same situation that we find ourselves embedded in the 20th century, and under the administration and all this political demagoguery that we're in. It's almost as if people want to build up the walls to create the box so that they may live inside of their box and never really exfoliate themselves out of it and make the conquest of dimensionality. This is why we urge ourselves to build bridges and more art forms, because as the bridges are built, this way we can conquest our dimensionality into the other space. This is what we all should aim to do. And everybody is an artist. Everybody has the potential of millions of minds inside of them. But it is all up to you as an individual of how you will change the world. One view can alter 1,000 different mindsets. It just depends on how powerful it is that you're willing to rebel and push back, you know?